The next point which is important is candidate screening. This is a very interesting point which I came across over the years and months that I have been part of the HR profession, is that when I say candidate screening, it's usually is post screening. Once the candidates get hired, the reference check, his experiences, all of that needs to be checked clearly. Just to give you a figure on what a candidate usually falsifies on his resume is wherein Jojo will share the numbers with you.
So it's 40% of applicants basically falsify about their work history and education background.
And 20% in terms of work histories, wherein they would talk about the time. If they have been there for let's say 6 months, they will try to exploit it to a year. And if they have done just the bachelor's and they have not completed the bachelor's, or they have not done from a particular institute, they will brag about that as well.
And 20% of applicants falsify the credentials and licenses.
Licenses and credentials is in terms of the certifications that they might not have taken up, they did not clear. They would write about that also on their resumes. So this is a red signal for us. Whenever a different credential or a license comes up on an application, it's important to ensure that by talking to the right authorities, to ensure that he actually earned that.
And 30% of applicants make misrepresentations on their resumes.
Usually the misrepresentation happens in terms of the job responsibilities. He might not be at a manager level, he might not be handling a team, but in the resumes they usually brag about that. So it is in the interview, it is important for us that we cross-check all of that to ensure that the right candidate comes in. In India, the post-screening is still at a very nascent stage. We Indians, we do not share information once the candidate leaves the organization. I think this is a weak link between the organizations. We need to have a system in place wherein such candidates who we come across do not meet our expectations or falsify records. The name should be spread in a particular network, and we should all be alert about this. Wherever this candidate goes, he or she is not going to be an asset to the organization. He is going to be a liability to the organization in the end. So it's important to have the right screening process in place.
I think organizations like NASCOM is starting to do an employee database of some sort, but I only hear about these things. I don't know how much it's been implemented or not. And a lot of times also corporates don't really like to share information, and that way you can't, there's very few actually that really do reference check. And when you do reference check, you don't really, sometimes people give their, spouse name or things like that as well. So how do you know whether you're actually doing a reference check?
Yeah, that's very true. Having said that, actually we have experienced that in the past. And I think for companies like us, which are a small setup, we do not invest a lot in terms of doing the reference checks or getting a software in place which could help us in hiring. We usually, the normal process is to advertise. Once we get the applications, we do a shortlisting. Once the shortlisting is done, which takes a lot of time and effort, because no two resumes come in the same format, and if you get like 50 resumes for one opening, it is simply impossible to do a comparison between, let's say, 5 resumes or 10 resumes, because there is no standardized application in place. So it is important, I think, to have a pre-hire testing in place, wherein there are assessment companies, there are HRIS companies like us, which help us in streamlining the hiring. This way it helps us in reducing the recruiting time and cost and the training cost, and which in the long term improves corporate performance, because recruitment and turnover are two ongoing things. This has to happen. There cannot be a day which goes by wherein either of this does not happen. So we have to take this in a stride, and we have to ensure that how can we make this more stable, more streamlined. Take the case of job boards. In job portals like Naukri.com and Monster.com, they usually provide a screening process which is based on few keywords. You put in the keywords and you get applications and resumes based on those keywords. These the resumes that are shown are marginally better. They show marginally better candidates, and they do not screen out people with titles that do not match their skill set. So it's very important to have a process and a system in place which helps at least in pre-screening the candidates, putting the resumes in a standard format, and once that is done, it becomes easy to do the comparison. It helps in the comparison and the hiring, and it shortens our hiring process. So it is very important to look at the new technology, look at what is happening outside, and do away with the process and the system which consumes a lot of time, energy and effort. Look at the processes. Part of the processes which can be made redundant should be made redundant over time. Before we go on to that, a very important point that I think is left is that the lack of standardization in schools and colleges. When I use the term lack of standardization in schools and colleges, is because of the IT boom. A lot of students, they wanted to do engineering, and basically wanted to do engineering in computer science. As a result, a lot of institutes and colleges sprung up all over the place giving these degrees. But although the major difference between a candidate who is coming from a good institute and a candidate who is not coming from not so good institute is that the basic difference, although the subject matter, the subjects taught would be the same, the basic difference would be in the dissemination of knowledge, how the information or the knowledge was disseminated to these students, and that in turn defines their skill sets, their knowledge level when they come into the organization for hiring. So as a HR, it is very important to have the right screening, right tools in place so that the right kind of candidate gets in.
So just because they have a degree doesn't necessarily mean that they know programming or they have the skill set.
That's very true. And when a fresher is hired, they usually the comprehension skill sets are there, but the application of that knowledge is absolutely missing. If you ask him how would he apply a concept, he is like doesn't know how to answer. So that is wherein the major difference comes in. They are more of bookworms rather than practical aspect of the knowledge that they gain in school is missing.